All right, good morning. I'm Felicia Marcus, Chair of the Water Board, and today is Tuesday, August 2nd at 9:06 a.m., and the meeting is called to order. With me on the dais, it is a dais, isn't it? Yeah. Dais, thank you. To my left, Vice Chair Fran Spivey Weber. To her left, Board Member Didi Diadamo. To my right, Board Member Tam Dodak. And to her right, Board Member Stephen Moore, who was just confirmed by the Senate and was with us for another 4 years. Yay. No dissent, unlike some of us. Yes. Rub that in. Mr. Bishop, would you please introduce the staff assisting us?
Yes. To my left is Chief Counsel Michael Laufer. To my right is Chief Deputy Eric Oppenheimer. And assisting the board today is Janine Townsend, and Tom is enjoying Maine.
Excellent. For those of you who don't know, our emergency evacuation procedures, it's fairly much common sense. If you do hear an emergency alarm, please take your stuff, take your friends, and proceed cautiously out of the building. We regroup over near the corner of Cesar Chavez Park near 10th and J. If you want to wait with us, you'll know when the all clear comes. Other thing is that the meeting's being webcast and recorded, so please, when you come up, speak into the microphone close enough that it gets picked up. We can hear you, but we want people over the webcast and people in the back of the room to be able to hear you. Try not to get so close to it that it pops. Also, and I. Yes, I. Please silence your phones or other noise-making devices. There we go. Board Member Dodak likes you to check twice. That's important just out of courtesy. Although occasionally Siri does ask an interesting question. That is not what we're here for today. And with that, we're on to the public forum, which is the part of the meeting where someone can speak to us for a few minutes about an item that is not on the agenda. We have one speaker card from Bob Gore. Good morning, Bob.
Morning, Chair Marcus and members of the board. I'm Bob Gore, the co-chair and founder of the Agricultural Technology Roundtable. The purpose of these few words is to put a bookmark in a significant pending issue for water savings. Our colleagues at the California Emergency Technology Fund this week released a poll that, no surprise, finds a significant shortfall in broadband in rural areas,
right,
as Fran well knows. Well, without broadband, there is no technology to enable irrigation savings. And we all know what irrigation water does and can do. The members of the roundtable are leading regulators and senior executives from farm and tech organizations. Our agenda is to accelerate the adoption of agricultural technology, and the hidden agenda is to create jobs, good jobs in disadvantaged areas. So far, we've been succeeding, but the lack of broadband is a significant roadblock. Kenny Watkins and I from the Farm Bureau have been working with this PUC and their Broadband Council to accelerate this, but we'd appreciate the Water Board's assistance as the opportunity arises. Robert C. is also a member. You may know him from USDA. He's their innovation lead. And also, I work with the Farmer of the Future at West Hills College in Coalinga, which has a 2/3 disadvantaged population. We are aware of significant technology integration that's about to emerge, and it's got to have broadband or it simply won't work. Thank you.
Right, but Bob, if you don't mind a minute, I know I've heard Commissioner Sandoval talk about this, the PUC, for quite a while. Do you have suggestions on how we can be helpful? I know you'll let us know as they arise, but I'm so curious how we could be supportive of that.
Commissioner Sandoval is a member of the roundtable, but by the way, so we're directly engaged. The vice chair is and I sit on WETCAT, which is pushing broadband, and I think it will emerge through that avenue. I just wanted you to be aware and be ready to jump in as you get it. But we can't take a passive approach to agricultural technology. Otherwise, the irrigation savings will literally never emerge because as Kenny says and others, Hank Glickus from Western Growers, you get out in the middle of a field and you hold up your cell phone and it's just dead. You get nothing. And you have to go back to your house and you may get reception to download what you've got. Well, that won't do real-time integration, which I'll say one thing. Right now, the sensors exist to enable the irrigation not on just a row level, but on which side of the plant is stressed. So we're getting that finally calibrated.
That's great.
I'm going to just jump in here and say that this is a top priority for the Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley. And, you know, Karen Ross and I and Diana Dooley, Secretary Dooley, are all on that committee.
Great.
And it's extremely important for fire protection.
Oh, sure. Great. No Skynet that. Yeah, it's good. All right. Minutes. Do I have a motion?
Move adoption of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. We have 2 uncontested items. Are they still uncontested? All right. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Right. Those are carried.
Oh, you didn't call for the vote.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and thank you.
See, I give up the chair for a week and I forget the basics. Item number 4. Mr. Bishop, do you want to introduce it or?
This is our update on the ongoing drought emergency in California, and staff will be giving you a short update.
All right, so this is our internal briefing week, right?
Good morning, Chair Marcus, Vice Chair Spivey Weber, and board members. My name is Rich Sitkowski, and I'm an engineer of the Division of Water Rights. And with me is Diane Riddle, the program manager of the Hearings and Special Projects section. Let's see here. Waiting here for the PowerPoint to come up. And this morning, we're going to have a brief update on the Sacramento River temperature management planning as part of the drought update. So, and as I mentioned, this will be a very brief update. So on July 5th, Reclamation, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation submitted its final temperature management plan to the Executive Director for approval. Thereafter, on July 8th, the Executive Director sent Reclamation a letter approving the temperature management plan, subject to a few items, and two of the most important items was a weekly monitoring of the Shasta reservoir temperature profiles and a weekly checks to ensure that there's sufficient cold water in the reservoir, and that's cold water less than 49 degrees Fahrenheit. That's how it's defined. On just a few days ago, on July 28th, Reclamation reported more cold water than is projected compared to the June 7th modeling runs that was done. So that's good news. So this is the
For once.
yes, this is the Lake Shasta isothermal bath, which shows the amount of water and the amount of water at certain temperatures, and essentially they're tracking the slope of the cold water, and there is a bit more than they had predicted, and so because of that. Oh, and let me back up before I go to the next point and just say that based on the June 7th modeling runs, it was anticipated that the values shown here on the slide would be the release values in order to ensure enough cold water is in the reservoir throughout the season through October. And so in June, it was an average of 9,000 cubic feet per second. In July, it was 10,500 cubic feet per second, a maximum of 10,500, not an average. In August, 10,000 average, September 9,000 average, and then October 6,500. And so I just wanted to point out that the August value is 10,000. And so based on that, reclamation is going to be maintaining the flows at 10,500 cubic feet per second through the first 10 days of August because there is extra cold water, and we'll be discussing with the Shasta Water Interagency Management Team, the SWIM team. We'll talk to them about a proposal to maybe consider keeping the flows at 10,500 cubic feet per second throughout the month of August. So that's the update.
Well, maybe if you could provide some information about why, how the Bureau's operating kind of on the edge.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my understanding is that they've run into some water supply concerns south of the Delta, and I think they want to, because we held some flows back in the beginning of the season, pending completion of the temperature management plan and assurance that we'd have adequate cold water to get through this season. Now, it would be helpful to their operations to bump the flows up at the end of the season here, and there appears to be adequate cold water to do so. So the plan is to continue to monitor conditions and ensure that we have adequate cold water, and that this bump up in the flows is sustainable while also sustaining adequate cold water through the season.
I think the key is to be sustainable but still be conservative about it. I just think I'm glad that they're ahead. That's great. And if it gives some relief that the fish agencies are comfortable with, I think it's worth considering, but we cannot cut it to the margin the way we did those last 2 years. So
Right, I think
just
everyone's...
this is a year to be conservative because we have so few fish coming, so it's a double whammy. So
Yeah, I think everyone's in agreement on that one. And yeah, as you indicate, the fish counts continue to show the lowest numbers on record. The record doesn't go back very far, but still for the 13 or 14-year record, this is the lowest return that we've seen. So it is, I think the fish agencies and the board and reclamation all acknowledge that we need to be conservative and protect the few fish that we do have.
And getting back to the issue with the Bureau, I don't want to throw any numbers out there because I haven't been following it at that level of detail, but if you have that information on storage in San Luis, the Bureau share versus the state share.
I don't have that. We can have that for you next time. I think the Bureau and the department might be coming in. I know we have a packed schedule, so we're discussing whether they're going to be coming in or not. I can also send that to you all. I can get the breakdown of their storage. I know it's very low, and they are encountering some issues with making their deliveries.
Well, in particular, and again, because I don't know what the figures are, but between the borrowing that's gone on and the COA, the Bureau share is
right.
Practically.
Right, it's really the Bureau share that's the concern. Right, so we'll get that for you.
Right. Thank you.
I'm also here to give you a brief update on the drought funding, emergency drought funding.
Thank you.
My name is Damon Badial. I manage the Cleanup and Abatement Account Unit in the Division of Financial Assistance. I didn't prepare any slides today because I also have a brief update. So we've got 9 projects currently in the Cleanup and Abatement Account Unit. And we're processing those right now and working, staff is working diligently with the applicants to get missing information on applications. And then we can, propose a recommendation for the DFA Deputy Director. 5 of those projects are the result of a contaminated water supply, and that cumulative dollar amount is about $700,000. And then we also have 4 projects that are the result of a drought-related emergency, and that cumulative dollar amount is about $2.3 million right now that we're working on processing. In addition, last week, DFA Deputy Director approved 3 projects. One of them was the $56,000 roughly to Sausalito Elementary School to conduct a pilot study and install point-of-use devices throughout the school to address nitrate contamination. And the other project was $69,000 to 2 mobile home parks in Riverside County for bottled water to address hexachrome contamination. And also one of the big ones is we approved $1.6 million of state water board funding, not necessarily just CAA, but Prop 1 as well as CAA for the community of Highland Acres, or better known as Okieville, to address their ongoing drought emergency. And that funding will pay for a new well, a filling station, and a distribution system. And in addition to the state water board funding, other funding partners have also committed funds to this project. There's $500,000 that USDA will be committing to the project, and roughly $750,000 will come from DWR, and $250,000 of that from DWR is specifically just for engineering costs. And that is my drought update.
Oh, that's good, and I saw the Office of Sustainable Water Solutions newsletter is out enthusiastically. So I haven't read it yet, but I will look forward to reading that.
And the two Riverside communities are what?
They're mobile home parks. It's the Rancho Garcia Mobile Home Park and the Mezcua Mobile Home Park. They're neighbors, basically.
Thank you. Questions? Good. Thanks a lot. That's great. Next, item number 5.
Staff will now give an update on the emergency water conservation regulations.
Good morning.
Hey, Max. You're back. You're back in the chair.
I am back in the chair.
Oh, all right.
Okay, now I have a name tag. Now I'm officially in the chair. Good morning, Chair Marcus, board members, Max Gomberg with the Office of Research Planning and Performance, here to give the drought update for our emergency water conservation regulation for the urban sector in California. With me to my left is Jasmine Oaxaca from the Office of Enforcement. She'll talk about our enforcement and compliance activities. We are on month 25 of some version of collecting data from our 410 urban water suppliers in the state, and we are on month 13 of emergency regulations and emergency requirements. And the bottom 2 bullets show where we're at. So for June of this year, statewide, Californians conserved 21.5% relative to our 2013 baseline. Cumulatively, the reduction from June of last year through June of this year, so 13 months, is 24.2% statewide. So we're still close to the original 25% target.
All right. So maybe not as good as we hoped, but better than we feared in terms of the conflicting messaging out there where folks were saying their stress test was 0, but keep conserving.
Yes. So
21.5%
is
a healthy conservation in the absence of a mandate.
Absolutely.
All right. Public's doing it.
So here you can see the month by month conservation levels. This chart is somewhat similar to what the energy usage chart looks like. That one, if I recall correctly, is called the duck chart. And I know that Rob Oglesby from the Energy Commission is in the audience today, and maybe he'll have another animal interpretation. Just had to give that shout out. Oh, he's not even sitting there anymore. Anyway, so you can see it. It dips in the winter months and then pops back up for the summer when the greatest opportunity for conserving exists, because in the summer months, it's outdoor water usage where we can really cut back.
So we really are going to have to watch for August. I mean, obviously, we don't ever want a dip, but we expected a dip given that the we lifted the mandatory, so, and folks have relaxed. But we'll see, perhaps Mr. Boland or Jack will have a story to tell us about what's going on out there.
Yeah. So last year in the summer months, actually, we can go back. You could see we had highs, right? June 27.5, July 29.5, and August 27, which makes sense given that those are the hot summer months. That's when the greatest opportunity exists to cut back on that outdoor use. So now we had a great May, 28%. Now heading into the sort of the core of the summer, we've dropped a little bit, but that of course coincides with June being the first month under the new stress test regime. So I haven't come up with a better analogy, so I'm going to use the one that I know, which is, the proof is in the pudding. We're just going to see. Here's another look. So in total, 571 billion gallons of water saved over the last 13 months, enough to provide 8.8 million people with water for a year. It really is, this is a significant amount of water that's been saved. This is real water, and it's a real benefit to the state. This slide shows the comparison by region between June of 2015, last year, and this June. And what's notable...
Explain this, because I looked at this chart and it wasn't intuitive to me, but I'm not good with charts, so.
So the darker line that's on the top is this year. And then the lighter line that's lower down is last June. And so the numbers you see associated with those lines up there are the RGPCD, so that's the gallons per capita per day for region-wide for each of our regions in the state. And then the bars are the total volume in acre feet. So what you're seeing, for example, what's notable here, if you look, for example, at the Sacramento River region in the middle,
This is good.
you can see on the bar charts in June 2016, this June, the total use was a little over 60,000 acre feet, whereas June last year it was 50,000, almost 51,000. So there's been a reduction in the amount of water saved. And you can see that commensurately up at the top, right? The gallons per capita per day, 179.7 is much higher than it was last June at 152.4.
This is a great chart. No, because it puts in one chart that difference in RGPCD, which is important, right? And it gives you sort of the relative scale between the regions. So you look at if I'm reading this right, you look at the Sacramento area, and they're the ones who have shot up in their usage per capita. Their total amount isn't that big. Obviously, South Coast encompasses half the state, so it's kind of, if we broke it down more, maybe we'd see something interesting. But then you look at San Francisco, which you would think would drop, but they use a lot less water to begin with. So it's got three different planes of information on it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, and looking at San Francisco, you can also see that water use is up from June last year too,
Yeah.
in sort of equal volume to this region. So it sort of speaks to water use being up more in Northern California, which is understandable given that Northern California got more precip than Southern California did over the winter.
Right. You do see that in terms of the bounce back. You also, though, note that North Coast is virtually the same, even though they got more precipitation.
That's right. Do they have lawns? They don't have lawns in the same extent. Interesting. Need a wallet card of that one this month.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the stress tests, the self-certifications that people are waiting on. We have received 379 stress tests, these self-certifications that the board required beginning in May when you adopted the extended emergency regulation. And they actually were elective things. So as you can see, not all the suppliers elected to submit a stress test, and the option was if a supplier didn't submit a stress test, that supplier would stay with its pre-existing conservation standard. So in some cases, that's what those suppliers elected to do, but the vast majority submitted this large volume of information, which includes a look at supply conditions out 3 years, demand calculation, and supporting documentation. So whether it's about the groundwater basin that they're drawing from, or their surface water diversions, or what they're purchasing from a wholesale supplier, other supplies, that's all included in the documentation. And part of what's taken staff longer than anticipated is just going through all that documentation and making sure that it's complete, and that it's easy to follow. The idea behind these stress tests is that it would sort of be a rigorous, well-documented approach to what is supply reliability under an additional 3 years of dry conditions. And so what we're doing is we've been doing a lot of follow-ups with suppliers that didn't give us enough, essentially, that didn't, for example, characterize their ability to continue pumping out of a groundwater basin, or their ability to continue using other supplies. And so in many cases, what we're doing is simply contacting the supplier and talking them through what is it that they need to do to have full documentation. It's not necessarily a problem with inaccuracy or suppliers trying to hide the ball for the most part. So that's what we're working on. We intend to have an update soon, hopefully by the next board meeting.
And ultimately, that will be publicly available, and that's part of the goal here. Is this is transparency, and so you're coaching the folks to make sure there's adequate information that we put on the website.
Absolutely, that is the goal, and that's why we're taking the necessary time to make sure that what goes up is complete and well documented.
Right, and you had to help some folks, wholesalers and others, with the directions. I mean,
Yeah.
the key is to have the right information as opposed to playing a game of gotcha, so I think the time you're taking is smart.
So I'm now going to pass it over to Jasmine, who will talk about our compliance and enforcement activities.
Chair Marcus, members of the board. So despite being in a period of transition between the different versions of the emergency regulation, our work in enforcement continues. We're following up with 8 suppliers that are missing monthly data report submittals. And then with regards to the self-certifications, over the next few weeks, we'll be issuing information orders in response to some incomplete and inadequate self-certification documentation, even after the follow-up steps that staff is doing. Once the self-certified conservation standards are finalized, we will be assessing compliance versus the new standards. Note that compliance will be cumulative, but the clock will restart in June 2016. Now, for those suppliers who chose not to self-certify, compliance continues to be assessed as it has been before on a cumulative basis starting in June 2015. Additionally, we are in the process of meeting with all the suppliers under conservation orders and alternative compliance orders to discuss the applicability of their orders moving forward, especially if they self-certified.
But there's a conversation there. If they were not in compliance with the rules, they weren't in compliance with the rules. And so just because we've now changed the rules doesn't take away the fact that they were out of compliance then.
That's correct. That's why we're meeting with them individually and looking at their order and making sure that they've met the requirements therein. And as the orders have been in place for about a year, many of them have met all those requirements. I wanted to note that we have rescinded the order for the city of Hemet, which had been meeting its March revised standard since that went into effect. For the other suppliers, we're holding off until the self-certified standards are finalized, and we'll likely rescind parts of orders or even entire orders based on our discussions with them. One encouraging thing I can say about having orders is that for a few of the smaller urban water suppliers, prior to having a conservation order, their conservation programs were non-existent. And now that almost a year is past being under those orders, the suppliers are seeing improvements in their conservation based on increased outreach to customers and targeting high water users with audits of their facilities. Additionally, many have increased their rates, so there's price signals associated with increased rates, and there's more staffing for local enforcement of water waste. Additionally, some have or will soon have upgraded meters with more technology to see the usage real time, and additionally they have leak detection programs in place now. So overall, for many, conservation is now a way of life, and in our books that's a success.
Right.
You know, I really appreciate that report, because that was the hope, is just the awareness would create institutional sustainability of these programs. And the necessary funding for them, but also just for the fixed costs of the system under drought conditions. And so this is an area where I think, you know, we could actually report quantitatively, you know, ultimately when we find the time, you know, in terms of the changes that have occurred, you know, with the spatial scale of that, the number of agencies that have made these changes, because that was a real hoped for outcome.
Yes, a lot of these things being put in place are long-term, so we'll see the effects in the future. I wanted to lastly talk about the 4 administrative civil liability complaints issued last fall. As mentioned previously, 1 had been paid, but now all the remaining 3 settlement agreements are now all finalized, and their supplemental environmental projects are underway, and we'll be tracking progress of those monthly. So we're excited to see the positive outcomes of those projects moving forward. And I'll now pass it back to Max to talk about the long-term conservation regulation plan. Next step.
Before you get started, has your office or have you talked with the California Public Utilities Commission about the use of swamp coolers? I know it was a big discussion when they were adopting their emergency regulations, which mirror ours. And Commissioner Sandoval in particular is interested, I think, because they were put in for energy purposes, energy conservation purposes, and they inadvertently are affecting water use. And so, so she's quite interested in making sure that folks aren't punished for having done something good at one point with, you know, not knowing what would be the consequences. So.
We are, in fact, and it's a perfect segue into the next piece of this, which is the long-term efficiency measures that we're working on with our partner agencies, DWR, the PUC, the Energy Commission, and Food and Ag, under the governor's executive order from May of this year, which requires a whole suite of actions to make conservation in California way of life and achieve some long-term efficiency gains. And as a bridge from what Jasmine was talking about, I think, you know, one of the great benefits to these conservation orders for some of the small systems under the emergency order is that, as she mentioned, these agencies now have programs in place. They now have the institutional infrastructure that will allow them to meet the new targets that we're going to set under these efficiency standards. So that's a really important thing. And then with regard to the swamp coolers, part of what the executive order calls for is a new generation of efficiency standards for all of these urban agencies, and there are components to those: indoor use, outdoor use, commercial, industrial, and institutional use, and water loss. So for the indoor use portion, in terms of, well, what's a reasonable amount of water to set a standard for indoor use, we have to take for some communities the use of the evaporative coolers into account. So we're looking at that as part of the development of these targets. And so you can see up there, it's not only these efficiency targets that are called for under the executive order, there are also actions to remove water waste, whether it's on the customer side of the meter or on the utility side of the meter, meaning leaks, yeah. But also wasteful water use, which I'll get to in a minute. And we've got improved drought planning under this, as well as improved efficiency in our ag sector. So there are actually 2 advisory groups that are being formed to assist the state agencies with implementing this executive order, one for urban and one for ag. As you can see, the urban advisory group, the first meeting is happening in a little under 2 weeks, and that'll be here. There will be 3 then subsequent meetings through November. The report is due back to the governor's office in January. And we're looking to schedule a board workshop on progress on implementing these elements of the EO and developing the recommendations for October. So as I mentioned, we're getting close to being finished with our reviews of these self-certifications, but it is taking some time. We will have an update for you all at the next board meeting. Don't know whether we'll be finished by then. That's certainly our goal. And then the last bullet here relates to that water waste element of the executive order. So the executive order not only focuses on leaks and actions that we can take to reduce leaks, but also on wasteful water practices. And of course, as a part of the emergency regulation that the board's had in place, we have the list of wasteful practices that are prohibited during an emergency. So that's the washing the vehicle without a shutoff nozzle, operating a fountain without a recirculation pump, irrigating during rain or 48 hours afterwards, and that long list, which includes the hospitality elements. So the directive from the governor is to make those emergency prohibitions permanent. So we'll be initiating a rulemaking process soon to make those permanent and be able to collect the data we need to continue on our measurement of urban water efficiency. And with that, our presentation is concluded.
Thank you. One last thing I forgot to mention is that the results of the month-over-month or year-over-year will be posted at some point this morning. And that's just interesting for those folks who really focus on that. It's interesting to look at. There's not an obvious story. So I encourage people to take a look at their local areas and compare. And, you know, in some ways you can't assume what it means, but you still see a really hefty level of conservation in places that have never had a very high conservation standard. And then you see other places that appear to be using more water and why. As we said, this is going to be a more complex period where there are a myriad different stories, and so it's hard to draw sweeping conclusions. But it's interesting to look at, and I'll be interested in what people pull out of it that I might not have seen. So thank you.
Definitely, and for those looking at it, they'll note that we have a handful of agencies marked as pending. That there seem to have been some data reporting issues that we weren't able to resolve ahead of the meeting today. We're working to resolve them. It looks like in most cases it was just odd circumstances or data entry issues that made it look like water use shot up in some communities when that wasn't actually the case.
Yeah, good. Well, it's good you double check that as well. Right, we have a couple of speakers. First, we have David Boland from the Association of California Water Agencies. And you can have 5.
Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you. SaveOurWater.com.
Save Our Water. Yeah, I was going to
Still
start
important.
and end there. Yeah, it's working. It's working really well. We're very...
And thank you, Caltrans.
And Caltrans is making a big dent. Yeah, a lot of things are falling together, not falling together as if it kind of happened, but coming together in an active sort of way. I just wanted to make a couple of points, just again, trying to draw a picture of what do we know now. Obviously, there's more to know as we unpack the data and start looking at individual trends. It was interesting to see the hydro region, that new graphic. It does show us that, there has been an increase around the state. We did kind of expect that. We did pivot to this new program for stress tests to look at reliability and allow us to move from sort of the crisis response that we had to more of a stay the course, focus in on what we can do appropriately to each water agency. And we think that's happening. So one of the things I want to do is just pass out a couple of these little handouts that we put together to staff and to the board members, and I'll leave a few out back. This will be posted on our Aqua website, and it actually highlights some stories of water agencies around the state and what they've done with their stress tests, essentially what the story is with the stress test. And in fact, it isn't just a simplistic, we passed the test, we're done situation. These agencies are messaging a lot on the long-term, way of life sort of message. Again, save our water. Are doubling down on the areas, many of them on specific areas where they've seen some big results, and they're getting those results. Some of them are actually gone ahead and carried forward with their numbers, even though they aren't in that 31 that chose to just stick with their particular previous tier measure or conservation standard. Some of the agencies have voluntarily implemented either the standard they had before, in some cases a higher standard than the one that they were issued.
Yeah, that's right, like
last year.
Santa Clara Valley,
And in
right.
some cases, a somewhat lower standard, but still trying to get a numeric standard for their customers. So they're sending those signals with standards in some cases. In other cases, they're talking about voluntary. In other cases, they've opted back to this idea of how many days a week of irrigation or some other kind of messaging. So we've got a kind of I guess you call it a survey or a snippet here of case studies that we want to just highlight on that. And just the idea that, we're trying to help as an association, our water agencies figure out how best to actively message with their customers about this. And the fact that a 0 number on their stress test does not mean that they're not doing conservation, that's not what that says. What that says is that they've filled their gap, that they've planned ahead, they've got the water resilient supply, they've got the program going forward to face 3 more critically dry years under this particular program. But that in addition to that, and separate from that, maybe on parallel track with that, they're implementing a robust conservation program. And then that they're putting that out there on the front burner as to what that is. And again, going with the lawn replacement programs in many areas, going with indoor conservation retrofit programs and funding for that, and just going out on house calls. Many agencies have built up. I appreciated the staff's noticing or identifying the fact that many agencies have staffed up in response to this crisis that they've been through and are in. And that staffing is still bearing fruit in terms of customer contacts. And I guess the underlying message is that we're seeing the results as we had hoped in terms of continued conservation, that many agencies are in much better shape in terms of their total production numbers than they were in 2013. And that regionally, that's cumulatively evident in the data that there has been a bounce back. We expected a little bit of a bounce back in terms of people using a little bit more water more judiciously than they had maybe in long-term past. But they are again, they're irrigating. Maybe they're not doing the shower buckets like they were, or not refusing to flush their toilets or whatever else in sort of the crisis mode that we were in last year. But in cumulative and in aggregate, we think Californians have really got the message, and this has become sort of a habit in terms of how to use water more efficiently statewide. And that's not just urban use. We're seeing that in the CII sector as well, and of course on the ag side. And we'll be talking a lot more about that as this long-term policy takes shape on both the ag and urban side. So we're optimistic and look forward to continuing to partner with the Water Board and with the Department, Water Resources, and the other agencies in terms of charting a long-term course.
Now, one question I have to say, again, when I said that it's not as much as we hoped for, but not as low as we feared, I think one of the concerns I had, and this goes to messaging, is that agencies were very proud of themselves for having done that preparation between droughts, whether it's recycled water, groundwater banking, and, in one case, desal, but in more cases, recycled water, groundwater banking, and the like, and that's all very much to the good. I was just worried when folks were trumpeting, yay, we're a zero, and that was sending the message to people drought was over and that they didn't need to conserve. I noticed anecdotally you had agencies who said, we're a zero, but keep saving, and here's why, which is a better answer, but it's sort of, I think there's been a lot of confusion about what the messaging is. So I appreciate your effort and then you're explaining it. I think, well, the July results are going to tell us a little more. Anecdotally, we heard about agencies encouraging people to use more water, but then I won't name them. When I looked at the numbers, they hadn't really dropped. So either their consumers weren't listening to them or it wasn't that, the anecdotes were wrong. But so I think we're going to have a mix of stories. And I think that continuing conservation message and, sort of is going to be a bunch of individual stories. But I was a little nervous when folks turned things in that they weren't thinking about that broader messaging as much as they should have.
Yeah, and I think we've as an association and the majority of the agencies that are our members, I think we turned the corner on that. There was a problem at the very beginning about that zero number. Frankly, we're discouraging the use of the term zero. We're talking about passing our stress test. We're talking about
that's a better
filling
way
the
to
gap.
put it.
We're talking about complying with the regulation as opposed to emphasizing the mathematics here. And so we think that that's an important, and it's a difficult message to convey, the fact that we appreciate you going forward and doing what you've been doing. You don't have to do it maybe as intensely as we were doing in the height of the drought. We did have a good rain year in many parts of the state and supplies are in good shape. We've shown that through the stress tests statewide. But we need to be standing guard and as you've said before, sort of all hands on deck. And I think that's the message that's coming through overall loud and clear. And I think the press is picking up on that now too. There was a little confusion, I think, a few months ago about when the board acted, and then the question of whether that was a wise action or not. And I guess the point here is that we do need to play it out. We do need to see how we're doing. The proof is in the pudding. Thanks.
Thanks very much. And again, thanks for all your help on the Save Our Water. Amy Talbot from the Regional Water Authority. There you are. Hi.
Hello, Amy Talbot, Regional Water Authority. We are a membership organization that represents 20 water agencies in the Sacramento area. I just wanted to add a little bit of context to the graphic that Max presented. That I thought was a really great graphic. You could see everything on one shot. But I wanted to explain the Sacramento story.
Good.
And our savings was in the 30s last year in June 2015. And that's when you see the jump down in 2016. That's 22% for our region. And I wanted to explain it's not necessarily a jump. It's actually on par with the majority of the other regions saving 20%. And that the Sacramento region, under the mandatory conservation targets, had some of the highest targets in the state. And so that's why you see the difference in the line graphic is that we actually started up in the 30s and now we're still in the 20s for June 2016 savings. We think that's exceptionally good considering the mandatory regulations have been removed and the hot temperatures that we've had in this region, and knowing that effect on outdoor water use and the increase in use that we have in the Sacramento region. I also wanted to tell you a couple of things that we are doing to maintain that savings. We've doubled our outreach budget for the region, including some of our individual agencies. We've partnered with Save Our Water to basically revisit your yard, or rethink your yard, excuse me. And we use the hashtag with our regional outdoor water savings. We've created a billboard campaign you can see throughout. Hopefully you've seen them. I know there's two right in a row between here and Davis on the right side. if you see them. And basically what we've done is we've featured residents throughout the region that have made permanent changes with their landscape, hoping that they will entice others to do the same. So we're taking what we've learned in the drought and turning it into a long-term campaign, and that's what we're trying to do now, and that's why we anticipate that we'll have continued savings. We don't think that we'll bounce back totally to the figures that we had before the drought. In addition to that, several agencies are keeping the same enforcement staffing that they had during the drought, during the mandatory targets. They're continuing their programs, and they're also continuing the same level of public outreach. So a lot of things have changed, but at the same time, a lot of things have not changed. And we think that even with releasing the mandatory targets and the mandatory standards, that we will see savings, even considering the hot temperatures that we're having right now. So I just wanted to add a little context to the graph, which I think is really important, and it's nice to see it broken out in regions. But I wanted to add a little bit of context to the story, because as you know, a graphic is 1,000 million words, whatever the saying is. So I just wanted to add a couple more. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. Yeah, you have a pretty wide range too. It's not that everybody's doing the same. It was one of the more interesting regions, community to community within it. So when you look at the data, I'll be interested in your take on what you see at the more micro level. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Thank you, and please thank the whole team again for talk about all hands on deck. It's been a long year, and you've all done a great job, so thank you. All right, moving right along, item number 6.
Item number 6 is a proposed order addressing Pacific Gas and Electric Company's petition for reconsideration of a water quality certification.
Good morning, Chair Marcus and members of the board. I am Jeff Wetzel with the Division of Water Rights. Here with me is Aaron Ragazzi, the Program Manager for the Water Quality Certification Program, and David Rose from the Office of Chief Counsel. We're here today to present item number 6, which is consideration of the proposed order addressing Pacific Gas and Electric Company's petition for reconsideration of the water quality certification for the DeSable-Centerville Hydroelectric Project. PG&E owns and operates the project located on the West Branch Feather River and Butte Creek, just east of the city of Chico. The executive director issued a certification on April 8th, 2015, and PG&E submitted a petition for reconsideration to the State Water Board on May 8th, 2015. I will provide a short overview of the grievances raised by PG&E in their petition and staff's recommendations as reflected in the draft order and the associated revised certification. PG&E's grievances are centered around general conditions related to complying with the Basin Plan and water quality standards, reservations of authority for climate change, total maximum daily loads, new or revised water quality objectives, changes to the project, monitoring results, and others. PG&E asserts that the reservations of authority give the State Water Board powers not authorized under the Federal Power Act to unilaterally modify existing Federal Energy Regulatory Commission licenses or FERC licenses, and requests that these be eliminated. Reservations of authority are a common element of the State Water Board certification due to the need to ensure protection for water quality in the face of changing circumstances over the term of the licenses. This is especially true for FERC licenses, which are issued for 30 to 50 years. Staff does not agree that there is good justification for removing these conditions and proposes no changes to these conditions. PG&E also objects to the specific language of Condition 50, which requires notification prior to ground disturbing activities. PG&E requests clarification because ground disturbing activities is a broad statement. Staff agree and have proposed to change the condition to ground disturbing activities that may adversely affect water quality. In addition to its reservation authority grievances, PG&E objects to specific conditions related to project operations, one of which is the Condition 12's requirement to submit a plan to construct a fish ladder at the Hendricks Diversion Dam on the West Branch Feather River. PG&E asserts that there are numerous natural barriers downstream of Hendricks Diversion Dam that prevent fish from migrating upstream, and because of that, a fish ladder serves no purpose. PG&E is requesting that the requirement to construct and operate the fish ladder be removed. PG&E's contention ignores the fact that the barriers downstream of the dam may only prevent fish from migrating upstream at certain low flows and not throughout other times of the year. Condition 12 is consistent with FERC staff's recommended alternative and has the support of the fishery agencies. Also related to the West Branch Feather River operations, Condition 1B requires the development of a plan to evaluate the migration corridor downstream of the Hendricks Diversion Dam to the confluence of Big Kimshu Creek. PG&E objects that it cannot be required to alter the natural stream channel or conduct activities outside the FERC jurisdiction and on private property. Condition 1B does not require PG&E to construct a structure on private property, but allows PG&E to consider and propose a range of actions to provide migratory connectivity for the resident fish. Furthermore, submission of a plan to the Deputy Director for approval is not the same as requiring any of the things PG&E objects to. And PG&E can submit a plan for approval that does not require actions it objects to in its arguments. Similar to the fish ladder requirement, the evaluation of the migratory corridor is consistent with the FERC staff recommended alternative and was a resolution reached during FERC relicensing meetings in 2009. Staff think the ladder is necessary as required in Condition 12, but recommends changes to clarify and consolidate related requirements. In order to ensure that PG&E's fish ladder plan does in fact serve its intended purpose, the migration corridor evaluation requirement originally included in Condition 1B is incorporated as part of Condition 12.
Could you say that again?
In order to ensure that PG&E's fish ladder plan does intend to operate as we anticipate, the migration corridor evaluation requirement is incorporated into Condition 12. It's moved from Condition 1B to Condition 12.
Instead of PG&E doing two separate plans, this will now, the migration corridor evaluation will be part of the fish ladder plan and one segment of that plan.
That makes sense from an efficiency perspective, but I thought that what I heard you say on Condition 1B that, and I'm having a hard time keeping up because you're going a little quick,
okay.
So maybe if you could slow down a little bit, but that it allows PG&E to consider a plan and that they would be just submitting a plan that, in other words, they wouldn't be submitting a plan that they would be objecting to. So if you move that Condition 1B into Condition 12, would it change any of that?
So to clarify, what's required in Condition 1B is an evaluation of the migratory corridor. So that evaluation has now been integrated into the Hendricks Diversion Fish Ladder Plan so that those things will occur simultaneously. With respect to the objection raised by PG&E, that was specific to having to incorporate structures or build structures on private property. There are other ways that PG&E could make improvements to that migratory corridor if it's deemed appropriate. Right now, it's just an evaluation, so PG&E could provide additional flows within that area. That's one alternative to structures. So there's not an inherent need to necessarily construct things. There is a need to evaluate what the range of possibilities are, and that's what this requires.
Okay.
The proposed certification also amends Condition 12 to allow the operations group to limit those flow releases identified for the need of the operation of the ladder or the migration connectivity to only the minimum in-stream flow specified in Table 2 if the operation group determines additional flow is needed to protect the spring run Chinook salmon in Battle Creek. Butte Creek. PG&E also requests removal of 4 stream gauges required per Condition 3. PG&E contends that these 4 gauges are unrelated to project operations and outside of the FERC project boundaries. Staff supports PG&E's request for the 3 stream gauges identified on the West Branch Feather River. However, the USGS gauge on Butte Creek near Chico provides valuable real-time flow information and should remain a requirement of the certification. PG&E's objection to maintain and operate the USGS gauge does not actually arise unless USGS stops maintaining and operating this gauge. If that occurs and PG&E determines that a new gauge would serve the same purpose, PG&E may elect to propose a new gauge in place of the USGS gauge. So the proposed order and certification update condition 3 to remove the 3 gauges specified on the West Branch Feather River and also add a provision that allows PG&E to request Deputy Director approval to modify the gauging plan following consultation with the operations group. PG&E also objects to condition 23, which requires the submittal of a wet meadow funding plan for Butte Creek House. The basis for this condition is to continue the current FERC license requirement for ongoing preservation and management of wet meadow habitat. This existing FERC license requirement is offsite mitigation for the project impacts and is covered under a 1983 agreement between PG&E and CDFW. Staff recommends no changes to condition 23. PG&E also makes recommendations to a number of project conditions that staff agrees are reasonable. These conditions involve numerous project components, such as temperature criteria for fish stocking, requirements associated with the DeSabla Forebay water temperature plan, timelines for reporting streamflow modification, and consultation and notification practices for Philbrook Reservoir releases. Staff support PG&E's request, and the draft order and revised water quality certification reflect the changes associated with those items. As it relates to the Butte Creek Water Rights Decree, PG&E suggests modifying Mitigation Measure 3 to clarify that its obligations relating to the water users along the Upper Centerville Canal arise specifically when PG&E is operating the Upper Centerville Canal. Neither the Mitigation Measure 3 nor the certification are intended to alter the manner in which PG&E satisfies the requirements of the decree, and the modification of the right to the requirements of the decree is not part of PG&E's proposed project. Therefore, staff proposes clarification to Mitigation Measure 3 to simply state that PG&E is required to provide the 1.175 CFS of flow to the water users along the Upper Centerville Canal in a manner identified in the Butte Creek Water Rights Decree. During the comment period for the draft order, 4 comment letters were received. 1 letter was received from PG&E requesting additional modifications and minor clarifications to the proposed revised certification. Specifically, PG&E requests further clarifying language to Mitigation Measure 3 and additional language to footnote 1 of Table 2. Staff considered those suggestions and has proposed change sheet 1, which is available in the back of the room. The second comment letter received was submitted by Mark and Tanya Dale, which included a presentation on the history of the Upper Centerville Canal. Their letter does not support modifications to Mitigation Measure 3. The letter states that there is no environmental analysis conducted to satisfy the California Environmental Quality Act if Mitigation Measure 3 is modified per PG&E's petition. Staff considered the information provided by Mark and Tanya Dale, as well as the third comment letter along the same lines submitted by the Menashian law firm, and does not recommend any changes to the proposed order or amended certification outside of those in change sheet 1. Under these circumstances, there is no need to conduct further environmental analysis because the certification does not change PG&E's compliance obligations under the decree. The fourth comment letter received was from the conservation groups and in support of the draft order and the revised certification. That includes my discussion, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question about the change sheet. Just want to make sure that, so I've got PG&E's letter and the change sheet, and I suppose they can speak for themselves on this, but does it respond specifically to their concerns, or did you make a modification?
So we did not use the language that was proposed in PG&E's comment letter, but it does seek to address the intent of the clarification that they were seeking in those 2 areas of the certification.
Thank you.
Right, so your intent is not, is to keep the decree as the decree versus making a change, which both were concerned about.
Right, so PG&E had 2 proposed revisions. One was to Mitigation Measure 3, which references the decree but is separate from the decree. Mitigation Measure 3 specifically requires PG&E to release at least 2 CFS into DeSable forebay once the temperature reduction device is in place to ensure that the water quality within the forebay remains of adequate quality and doesn't have stagnation associated with it. So that's at least 2 CFS into the forebay to promote circulation. That's separate from the decree, which requires PG&E to provide 1.175 CFS to users along the Upper Centerville Canal under certain circumstances as outlined in the decree. Nothing in the certification seeks to change the decree.
But in it, you also say that that separate thing might be helpful in the context of the decree, or the
Yes.
concerns of the community
Yes.
members.
And so that was one comment that PG&E made. The other comment that PG&E made was to request clarification to footnote 1 on table 2, and that was to seek clarity that if the deputy director approved a modification, that the operations group could make a determination that that would carry forward, so that we weren't going to have them come in and get a separate deputy director approval again. And I'll let them speak to whether or not they feel the proposed language in change sheet 1 addresses their concerns.
All right. Other questions? Well, we have quite a few speakers, particularly from the community. I'm going to say 5 minutes. Someone asked for 10, but generally 5 is enough. It's more than we frequently give to make the point, and there are a lot of people. So let's try and keep to 5 if possible. I'm going to name the first 3 in sort of rolling order so people know when to be. They're on deck to be on deck. First we have Jim Gill from PG&E, followed by Russ Gantz on behalf of himself, followed by Donna Bristol from the Upper Centerville Canal Association. Mr. Gill.
Morning, Chair Marcus, members of the board. My name is Jim Gill. I'm the Director of Hydro Licensing for Pacific Gas and Electric Company.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you. I'd like to just start by thanking the board and your staff for your time and consideration of our petition for reconsideration. We greatly appreciate it. We've had an opportunity to review the draft order and change sheet number 1, and we support all the changes that have been made. Thank you.
Mr. Cans, followed by Ms. Bristol, followed by Cheryl Silva, homeowner.
Morning.
Morning.
So some of you may remember me. Some of you don't know me, but I worked here for a long time. And I have gray hair because I worked here for a long time. I wrote the certification and did all the negotiation on this project, so I have a pretty intimate knowledge of the cert.
When?
Sorry, is that better?
Early on or when?
Yes, I worked on the project for a long time, and then I wrote the draft certification and I wrote the CEQA document, and I left the board just after I wrote the draft cert, which is now over 5.5 years ago, which should be an issue.
Okay.
Shocking to me. You all know that Butte Creek supports the largest population of spring run in the valley, so it's a really significant project. It's a very difficult project because of the small amount of water and the way the water balances out between the 2 sides of the project. And we were splitting CFS on this project and pulling our hair out, and nobody was happy in the end, but I think we did a good job. There's some things that are, for this project, that are important. One is the fish ladder. You probably don't know this, but the river actually is dry for a section where that diversion is now, and it's really necessary to modernize this project. It's a very old project. In fact, a little history, and PG&E may clarify, the generator at Centerville was bought off the floor of the International Exposition in San Francisco in 1906. Thanks.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of history. So it's an old project, and I like to see hydro projects modernized, as we go along. I'm very concerned about the language that's in the forebay. It's condition 9. It's different than what I wrote, and it's not that it's wrong, but it says PG&E will aim to achieve an 80%. And I don't know what that means. All of you that remember Jim Canada used to love to say, this is like saying I love you. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Aim to achieve is like that. And I don't know what that means. And I've read it. And, you know, the forebay, you can almost throw a rock across that forebay. It's small. And the plan was always just to put a pipe in. It's a little more complicated because if the powerhouse trips offline, you needed some capacity to back that water up and do some other things. And you can't have a stagnant forebay with a pipe running through it for 2 months during the summer. So you have to deal with that. It's not impossible. It's just an engineering exercise. I could take a thermometer and stick it in the top end of that pipe where the canal comes in and run to the other end where the penstock is and measure the temperature difference. You know, it's that short a distance. It's not a big deal. This is difficult engineering. So I think that language should be clarified, and I can't tell you specifically how to do that, but aim to achieve is not. I have lawyer scars from working here, and I just don't see how that passes muster with legal staff. Again, this has taken too long to get this cert finalized, way too long. It needs to get done. These fish need to be protected. And thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rose, what would be is aim to achieve terminology we use, or does it mean something, or what's the fair point?
Yes, of course it's a fair point. Aim to achieve is not the exact language that we use here. What we have is that they have to have their design aim to achieve the 80% effectiveness criteria.
Okay.
And so if they were to submit a design that was incapable of achieving 80% effective criteria, then they would be out of compliance. So
So it's not their compliance, it's
yeah,
the design.
we
Okay.
don't usually have aim to achieve or targets without strict compliance because it makes it difficult to determine whether somebody is in fact in compliance. But when they submit their design, we will know whether they are in fact in compliance or not. And the reason for this change was because of the margin of error in the measuring devices, essentially. So if they don't have devices that have have a lower margin of error than what we're asking them to achieve, then we won't actually know whether they're in compliance because they could be and the devices could be showing that they're out of compliance or the reverse. So that was the intent behind it, but the actual language can be satisfied and is susceptible to a clear reading where we can determine whether they have met it when they submit their plan.
Helpful, thank you. All right. Yeah, I mean, briefly what you mean, but we're not going to get into an argument here.
No, I don't want to do, I think that there's two different things, and I want to provide some clarification on the history of this. So there was a CE-qual model developed to try to figure this out, right? And to figure out what the reduction possible was. And I think we did a pretty good job, PG&E did a pretty good job on that. So we know what's achievable. There's what you design for, and then there's how you comply.
Right.
Right? So I guess when I see that aim to achieve, I'm seeing a backing off of what they need to design for. The 80% was kind of a gimme to PG&E to allow them some flexibility to circulate water through the forebay or do other things if necessary. 100% is absolutely achievable. You can jam a pipe through there and get 100% temperature reduction. There will be no heating of the water. So I think that's the part that I'm a little confused. Are we talking about a design criteria or a compliance? The compliance side is, it is what it's going to be based on what the design is. The design should, in essence, attempt to achieve 100%, right? That should be the goal. Thanks.
Hi, Ms. Bristol, followed by Ms. Silva, followed by West Bristol. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair and members. I am Donna Bristol, and I'm speaking in regards to the Upper Centerville Canal in Magalia, California. The Centerville Canal has carried water to us since the late 1800s. In the 1940s, a group of landowners sued and were granted continued water rights from the water carried down the canal. These rights were granted because the water that naturally came to these properties was diverted away to provide power to the Centerville powerhouse. Our property has water rights off the last diversion box. PG&E, having built the DeSabla Dam, currently controls the water and its flow. Last year, PG&E shut down the canal without proper notification to all neighbors with property rights for 3 months. For years, PG&E has neglected their duties of cleaning the canal, repairing leaks, or monitoring the water being siphoned off by local pot growers. Now they are being forced to make repairs on damages that should have been dealt with when they were small problems, not major. Several years ago, PG&E shut off the water to the canal, and we had to dig a deeper well. The consequences of their shutting off the water last year for 3 months was devastating. Our well did not produce enough water to do everyday items, to shower, wash our face, brush our teeth, do laundry, do dishes, nor flush the toilets. We became a third world country in our own home. Our pond and our tanks used for irrigation and fire suppression dried up. We were not safe in our home. The pumps would suck only air and dry up. The local ponds around our home were the breeding grounds for mosquitoes, adding fear of mosquito-borne diseases. With our water rights, we put in an irrigation system years ago that would water 5 of our 12 acres. For 3 months, we could barely do that. Our trees started dying for lack of enough irrigation water. By the end of the 3-month shut-off period, we lost 5 Japanese maples, 1 dogwood tree, 1 almond tree, 1 cherry tree, 2 apricot trees, 1 mimosa tree, 4 azaleas, and some oaks. Most of our lawn died and has not come back to the lush grass it was. Over the years, we had spent thousands of dollars for landscaping, and we got to watch it die. Over the years, we spent thousands. PG&E did provide 2,500 gallons of water for irrigation about a month and a half into their turnoff of our canal, but this was too little, too late. We alone spent $1,350 for a new holding tank and had to buy potable water to fill it. We had to pay $250 to have it filled every other week just to barely get by. PG&E did not provide potable water. Our ecosystem has been centered around the water flowing down that canal. The deer, bear, foxes, raccoons, rabbits, etc. need water. Granted, these larger animals can leave the area, but the smaller ones, frogs, squirrels, etc., will and have died. This year, we have seen no fox, raccoons, and only 2 squirrels and 1 rabbit. On a personal note, last year, I became so stressed from the lack of water, my hair started to fall out, and my blood pressure rose to levels higher than ever before, putting me on higher dosages of medication. This situation has been a huge financial and emotional loss to us. We have already had the canal shut off for 1 month this year. Luckily, our well held, probably because we had more rain this last winter. PG&E has already informed us that they have plans to shut the canal in September and October. That's 2 months. They also stated that we were on our own with regards to getting water. We are dependent on that canal water, and this area has been for over 100 years when it was known as Irish Town. We have held water rights before PG&E took over management of our canal. The way we live, our orchard, vegetable garden, fire safety, our well, as well as the welfare and wildlife depend on the canal for survival. Shutting off the water for months at a time is inhuman. A week, 2 weeks, we can survive. After that, it's just wrong. We are water right holders, and we are consumers, as we do use the canal water every day. Please do not allow PG&E to shut down our canal forever or for any long length of time. Thank you.
Number of speakers on this. I'm going to hold my questions till they're done. Ms. Silva, followed by Mr. Bristol, followed by Mark Dale.
I'm addressing the state water code 106.3 and our Fifth Amendment rights to the Constitution, the breaking thereof by Pacific Gas and Electric Company, and the petition for reconsideration 401 water quality certificate, May 2015, and this is the first hearing today.
Can you pull the microphone a little closer to you, or just get a little closer? Just want to make sure we can hear you.
We are legal domestic water users, pre-1914 water right holders, consumers of the 5.1-mile Upper Centerville Canal. It is our only source of water available. Domestic is a higher priority over hydro. PG&E is a contracted public service to us under existing 1902, 1904 right-of-way water agreements where we became consumers, which in exchange for PG&E to have the right-of-way to use our Upper Centerville Canal as a conduit for conveying extra water to the Centerville powerhouse down the Helltown Ravine. They agreed to provide our 1.175 CFS at all times that we were already receiving and to maintain the UCC canal to keep water flowing from diversion 45 Butte Creek Canal, which is commingled with the west branch of the Feather River, becoming one canal flowing into DeSable Reservoir where our water starts and goes down the earthen canal 5.1 miles to Helltown Ravine. It takes 2 CFS to deliver the 1.175 to the legal water users, consumers. They made a lot of money in 80 years generating electricity using our canal. For the last 2 years, since Kyle Envelson became in charge of the UCC, PG&E wants to get out of maintaining the UCC. So they have been using all means possible to stop our water access, breaking state law 106.3, denying us domestic water access, breaking our Fifth Amendment rights, taking our water without due process that we have had continuously for over 120 years, through changing terminology and documents, telling us we have to find another water source in April 2016, turning off our water all summer last year, slowing our water down for no reason, stopping flow completely, creating muddy areas, violating water quality, mosquito infestations, and killing off vegetation, creating fire hazards. We have no fire hydrants, killing microinvertebrates that live in the canal and feed the endangered salmon in Butte Creek, creating a big natural disaster last summer, which caused injury to the legal water users and the environment. We continue to have our water curtailed and shut down again for 6 weeks, and then back on June 1st, 2016, and again with water being off September 6th for 9 weeks, which will destroy our orchards, crops, gardens, causing injury to legal water users. New words added in the petition for reconsideration. Up to 1.175 CFS breaks state law 106.3, denying our domestic water access and Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. Only if PG&E chooses to operate UCC. PG&E owes us a public service under contract, a duty of absolute, non-variable. According to the 1915 Railroad Commission of the State of California, Decision 2899, Case 668, defendant PG&E plaintiff complainants of the UCC, quote, therefore, it must be held that under the circumstances surrounding the making of these contracts, the clause which in turn sets out the right of the company to discontinue service is ineffective and cannot be availed by defendant as establishing a right. Defendant has no right to curtail or stop this supply. The Railroad Commission is now the California Public Utilities Commission. And the draft submitted on 7/27/2016, you are not giving the public enough time to comment to the changes being made by quickly assessing it. The 401 water quality, page 4, water rights. PG&E has filed statements of water diversion and use for 13 active pre-1914 claims of water use related to the project. That is us. Yet in your new SWRCB draft, it is stated to supply 6 water users on our diversion box tap 5 alone. It supplies 8 families of water users, domestic, stock watering, irrigation. Most properties are zoned agriculture. Larger parcels have orchards, crops, vegetables, animals, etc.
You can just try to wrap up.
I
know you
please
wanted
continue
more
talking
time,
for a
but
couple more minutes.
just a little more, but not another 5.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, the SWRCB has to uphold the state Water Code Law 106.3, where it is hereby declared to be the established policy of the state that every human being has the right to safe, clean, affordable, and accessible water, adequate for human consumption, cooking, sanitary purposes. All relevant state agencies, the state board, when adopting or reestablishing policies, regulations, and grant criteria when those policies, regulation, and criteria are pertinent to the uses of water described in this section. Also, because of the new minimum flow requirement on the Hilltown Ravine in the 401 Water Quality, page 23, table 1, in order to comply, the Upper Centerville Canal has to have a minimum flow of 3 CFSs in a normal year and 2.5 in a dry year, since it feeds into the Hilltown Ravine. And you have a minimum flow of 1 CFS in a normal year. It's not going to get that unless it starts at the Upper Centerville Canal. I think somehow that was forgotten. So I'm stating that 9 reasons to have a minimum flow requirement on the UCC: to protect water access to legal water users, to maintain aesthetic property values, to maintain an environment, vegetation that keeps the water cool, which eventually feeds into Butte Creek, cooling off water for endangered salmon, to provide defense against forest fires since no fire hydrants, to keep water in ground, which feeds existing wells, to provide microinvertebrate to grow and feed endangered fish, to keep water in canal for the Tehama deer herd who frequent the canal to drink, and other animals, to keep water flowing so no stagnation for mosquitoes to breed. And number 9, the most important, to keep water flowing so water quality is maintained at all times. When flow is reduced, mud is picked up and reduces water quality, which then runs into the Butte Creek.
Thank you.
Critical the board enforces a minimum flow on the UCC and the 401 water quality certificate for the 9 reasons stated above, to uphold State Water Code 106.3 and Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. It is your job to do so. I hope you have a better understanding of the importance of our canal and our need for your help to help us protect its life-giving qualities to all the life that partakes in it, and its beauty and tranquility offers to the many residents and friends who live in the Magella area of Butte County. Please keep the flow going so everything doesn't die again. Thank you. Cheryl and George Silva.
Next, Mr. Bristol, followed by Mr. Dale, followed by Tanya Dale.
Letting us speak, and
That's
thank
a
you
big
for
deal.
the board.
Yeah.
We live at the end of the Nimshu Ridge, and I just wanted to give you a little history about the Nimshu Ridge. It is about 20 feet of dirt on top of 1,000 feet of lava cap. So we should be commended because we're not taking your groundwater. But this Upper Centerville Canal supplies our wells. And the reason we know that is every time the Centerville Canal gets shut off for repair, our wells go dry. So a couple of years ago, I had to drill deeper, and it cost me over $10,000 to go down an extra 100 feet. So you can see that, and they told me that if they come back and re-drill, they're going to go down 1,000 feet. They're going to get down into your water for the basin. So I don't think people can afford that. It would cost between $50,000 and $100,000 to get down where there's any sustainable water. So we should be commended for our conservation, because we got over 100 homes living on that ridge that are basically conserving by using only a foot of water. We're talking about a proverbial drop in a bucket, and it's just a matter of PG&E not using that Centerville powerhouse anymore. It's a money thing. But you know, We paid them a whole dollar and made a contract with them to provide us with water. What did they do with our dollar? You know, I don't understand why this is a big deal to them, but because they don't use that powerhouse anymore, they want to just shut off the pipe. And about, I think it was a couple of years ago, they put in a knob to turn it off. And they have been cranking it down and cranking it down and cranking it down until the flume does not even flow past my house anymore. It goes into our diversion box and I get my water there. But boy, they come down there and they make sure not one drop extra goes over that thing. So, you know, it's almost an eyesore to see that empty ditch. But I just wanted to tell you that from my perspective, it's almost ridiculous. And the reason they need this wording is so they can turn it off. And I'm almost ashamed of them because they have lied to us, said, oh, we're not going to try to change the wording. And they sneak around and they do this and they do that. And it's just appalling, especially with their commercials on how community oriented they are. And I'm telling you, we actually had to move out of our house for a month during that 3-month period because we couldn't even stand it. You know how toilets smell after about a week of not being able to flush them? And it's bad. And they say, well, just get another water source. Well, drill 1,000 feet, pay $250 a load because it's got to come from Orville, and they got to truck it uphill from 0 elevation to 3,000 feet. That's very expensive in gas. So there goes the pollution thing too. So we're going to go over the water air quality next. No, but you see what I'm saying? It's not even, it's a money thing. If they don't want to maintain the flume, fine. Give us that federal money. We'll maintain the flume because they get paid for that. So I'm just saying, please don't let them change the language. In fact, it might be a good idea if you do change the language to make it stronger so that they won't come back year after year after year, costing us thousands of dollars for attorneys and everything else to fight them and fight them. It's not feasible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Dale, followed by Ms. Dale, followed by Chris Schutz.
Good morning, Chair Marcus and members of the board.
Thank you for the pictures.
I think it's a good fortune for me that I've been able to come at the tail end of this rather than the beginning, because I've learned a lot just from listening to my fellow neighbors and water service rights holders. I think there's a lot going on here that doesn't have much to do with what you're doing here, okay? You can sense there's a lot of emotion. There's been a lot of hardship on our ridge. PG&E, I think, is well known for their public relations snafus, if you will. And up where we live, they've done an extremely poor job of communicating with us, sitting down with us, negotiating with us. It's been sort of a situation where they try to pick off a neighborhood at a time sometimes. And that's their business. That's how they are doing it, and that's okay. I believe personally, just as a citizen, that they would do much better engaging with us rather than messing with us all the time. I spent the last summer, we have a large apple orchard up there, and they cut off the ditch water, and we still can't figure out why, because there were no reductions in terms of our water rights. They're pre-1914. But anyway, so they brought out a 13,000 gallon tank, put it up on stilts, and every morning my wife and I wake up to the lights of the water truck coming in to fill the tank. I mean, it just seems like a lot of unnecessary hardship that's happening in our ridge. I basically want to focus us on one part of this issue, and that's mitigation measure 3. And with this background, when we read PG&E's petition, it was kind of like an electrical jolt to us, because we're kind of prepped for the hammer to come down. We're kind of prepped for the next time they want to do something kind of underhanded for us. So when we read this thing where they said that this statement is factually incorrect, referencing the decree, and PG&E suggests a minor modification, that sets your alarm bells off right there. In addition to that, they said that consumers along the upper Centerville Canal are entitled to use up to 1.175 CFS only if PG&E chooses to operate the upper Centerville Canal. That's like them saying, we'll provide you electricity unless we decide not to provide you with electricity. And that's just adding to the whole situation up there. I want to commend the staff here, first for the opportunity to be here. Secondly, that you guys gave us an extension on the deadline so that we could review the documents. And by the time we received the order last night, rather late, you guys put in long hours. I can't speak for my neighbors necessarily, although we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but I believe that the new wording that was submitted last night satisfies our concerns that PG&E is not going to be able to state something as blatant as we'll turn the water off whenever we feel like it. And I think that's going to calm things down a little bit. In addition, I would invite PG&E at this point to seek us out and let's talk. So I thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. Very thoughtful. Tanya Dale, hello.
Hi, we'll get through this. My name's Tanya Dale, and I also live up on the ridge that everybody's talking about. I wanted to go just off side note for just a minute. In my other hat, we do marketing, and we do marketing for a number of businesses, and one of them is a water district. And we have for 3 years been attending water board meetings in our own area, and we always hear about the water board down in Sacramento, and I was like, good to see it finally. This is really good to be able to see how you folks work and how the decisions that we get and that we have to change the messaging for in regards to conservation and
Oh yeah, those
wise water use.
interesting. They were
I've been
both
doing
on the
lots of
agenda.
wise water use messaging this spring and this summer. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to address you. The water is important, as you've heard from lots of our neighbors and stuff. However, what we are looking at right now is the mitigation measure 3 that was in there, the wording on that. And we preferred the way that staff had it originally, frankly, because it protected our interpretation of the decree, the 1942 adjudication. Obviously, PG&E and we, our attorneys, have a different interpretation of those historical documents. However, what's facing you folks right now as a water board is the decision of whether to accept this mitigation. And I appreciate staff. I had a good talk with Aaron prior to today's meeting to clarify, because with the change thing last night, it kind of was almost one of those, gee, do we need to come down? You know, it's like Lily Tomlin used to say, never mind, you know, do we need to come down? We do need to come down, because our concern is that I understand staff said, we're not going to look at this. We're going to just leave the wording for the 1942 decree in there and let you guys kind of handle that. And that's fine. But I'm looking this as a CEQA issue, because the assumption was made when this CEQA was the water quality certification, thank you, was made originally, was that it was under the 42 decree, which provided water. It had for 110 years. PG&E never turned it off. Even when they had to re-empty a dam, they kept the water flowing through to us. In the last 2 years, they've turned it off, as you've heard several times, and it's made us very sensitive to the idea that it will be turned off again. My concern is that the CEQA that was written up addresses it as if the water will not be turned off. And under that CEQA, it says that there would be less than significant impact on hydrology and water quality, and no impact on utilities and service systems. Well, that's true if they don't turn it off. But if they do turn it off, I can guarantee you there will be impact, and there's been no analysis on that. I'm concerned about that as a citizen, and that's what I'm bringing to you guys as a board. I appreciate the time to be able to do this morning at, how many of you guys here live on a water system that is private? Raise your hand if you have to do your own water. Okay, you can see Most people don't understand our concerns. I went out this morning, my husband and I did at 5:40 before we left to drive down here for 2 hours. The ditch is running. People call it a stream. If they're from the city, it's a stream. We call it the ditch. It looks like a small amount of water, as Mr. Bristol said. It doesn't look like much, but it makes our community survive. It makes our community thrive. My concern is that assumption has been made by the CEQA that water is going to continue flowing, and that CEQA does not address an analysis in case it does not. That's what I want to go on record as opposing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming all the way down. We have 2 more speaker cards, and then we'll ask questions. First, Chris Schutz from CSPA and the California Hydropower Reform Coalition, followed by Dave Steindorf from the American Whitewater.
Good afternoon, Chair Marcus and members of the board.
Hey, Chris.
For Chris Schutz, FERC Projects Director with the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance and Vice Chair of the California Hydropower Reform Coalition. 10 years ago, CSPA hired me specifically to work on the DeSabla Centerville relicensing for the hydroelectric project on Butte Creek and the West Branch Feather River. The operation of the project was high on the list of CSPA's concerns because of a die-off in 2003 of about 10,000 spring run Chinook salmon before they'd been able to spawn. My marching orders were to advocate that the lower Centerville diversion not operate in summer and fall, and that all project flow during that time period be left in Butte Creek. Today, we take a large step toward achieving that goal. Since 2003, PG&E and the agencies have substantially improved the operation of the project. In combination with multiple improvements in Butte Creek downstream of the project, Butte Creek has become a success story in fisheries restoration. CSPA and my conservation group colleagues have, along the way, contributed to the improved operation of the project through our engagement in relicensing and by being first responders to incidents related to the project that could affect aquatic resources as well as project operations. We look forward to a more formal role in the project's operations group. We have worked with board staff and other resource agencies to define the important role that conservation groups should have in implementing the new license. Specifically, we have discussed NMFS's concern regarding the NGO role in decision-making, and we believe the revised language in the draft order addresses NMFS's concerns. Though PG&E declined to discuss the matter with us, we believe the draft order addresses PG&E's expressed concern on this matter as well. I would particularly like to thank board staff for requiring a defined role to achieve active NGO participation in the implementation of the certification and the new license. We have asked FERC to require such a role in various projects over the past several years and have discussed the issue with FERC staff. FERC staff's most frequent response has been to ask, why don't you ask the 401 agencies to require it? On this, as on several other key hydropower issues, the board is ahead of its counterparts in Washington, D.C.
That's something.
It is unfortunate that PG&E's management and/or attorneys chose to challenge global issues related to the board's authority under the Clean Water Act in its petition for reconsideration. Equally unfortunate was the description by a PG&E manager before Congress of how this project exemplified what's wrong with the water quality certification process for relicensing. As the board and staff are no doubt aware, I and my colleagues have repeatedly expressed concerns over delays in certification. However, in this case, delay is at least equally due to PG&E's actions as well as PG&E's indecision about the disposition of Centerville Powerhouse. We would all be better off moving forward in the spirit and with a track record of cooperation that has been established in the project's operations group by PG&E staff and staff from the resource agencies. I would like to thank 3 past staff members of the board's Water Quality Certification Unit, Jim Kennedy, Russ Kantz, and Amber Villalobos. Each of these people spent years bringing this certification to fruition. Each applied the Clean Water Act as he or she believed appropriate in spite of considerable conflict and pressure that surrounded the relicensing process. We can ask for no more. They did well. We recommend that you adopt the draft order and certification today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Steindorf.
Chair Marcus and members of the board. I'm Dave Steindorf, California Stewardship Director for American Whitewater, and I'm also the chair of the steering committee for the Hydropower Reform Coalition in California. I was heartened earlier to hear PG&E that they're not contesting any of the revised changes to the order that's before you today. I have to say, though, that I am concerned that this is the second 401 cert where PG&E has challenged the board's reserve authority. And I'd like to address my comments to that today.
They didn't do it today, so I didn't have to make points like I did that last time.
I'm going to put a little finer point on it just because.
Be
Well,
my
one of the
guest.
concerns is that we're hoping that we're not going to see this type of challenge to the board's authority on each and every cert that comes up. And there are quite a number that are there we hope to see out in the next year and a half. Climate change is nothing that this group needs to be educated on, but it's real and the effects we're feeling right now. Just last week, I was in a implementation meeting for another hydropower project, and the licensee informed us that despite having normal rain and snowpack this year, their runoff predictions were substantially
Right.
lower than what all of their models had projected.
Because it was so dry. Right.
Good theory. We're still trying to figure that out. It could be dry. It could be because it was warmer earlier, but that's probably the most likely scenario. They did say that they're going to be able to meet their minimum stream flow requirements, but their reservoir targets, it's going to be very close. So we're going to monitor this going forward. After a few years of this, we may need to make some changes. So given this example and others, we're astounded by the fact that PG&E would suggest that the board should not be able to make changes to the water quality certification based upon climate change conditions. PG&E has suggested this should be the realm of FERC. I'd point out to the board that back in 2009, members of the Hydropower Reform Coalition suggested to FERC that they conduct a study on climate change scenarios in regards to the Yuba Bear Drum Spalding project, which is operated by PG&E and Nevada Irrigation District. FERC rejected that request, saying that we could just use existing monitoring to see what happens in the future with climate change. We think that it's inappropriate to put FERC in that role to determine when changes should occur to the existing conditions out there. So going forward, it's going to take the cooperation of licensees, regulatory agencies, and members of the conservation community in order to meet our water needs, our energy needs, and resource protection out there. Personally, I think that the father knows best approach that PG&E has suggested in their petition is going to be completely inadequate. Appreciate the thoughtful time that the board has spent in grappling with this, and also appreciate staff's time in looking at it. And even though I have a number of people from PG&E that I've worked with here for almost 2 decades, in this particular example, I think that you're actually helping PG&E protect them from themselves. So, and also I'd like to point out to the other folks that were here today that this is a tricky water rights situation. We get that. And I've spoken to PG&E staff about this. And, at the very least, these folks deserve a forum and a dialogue to figure out what is the future of this project and how's it going to be operated. That is something that has not occurred to date. And not just for the upper Centerville Canal, but we're talking about decommissioning of the lower Centerville Canal also. These project features have been part of this community for over 100 years. So it's worth the time and effort to sit down, collaborate, and figure out what the future will be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a number of questions, but I'll turn to others first. Question? Yeah, but if I can talk less, that's always good. I always use up all my words.
Well, thank you. We did hear from the last speaker from the Upper Centerville Canal stakeholders that he reviewed the language, and that's kind of my main question is, does the change to mitigation measure 3 as proposed in the change sheet address the concerns of the stakeholders?
So I think it depends on the stakeholder. What the change sheet does is it states that PG&E needs to continue to comply with the decree as written. As I mentioned earlier, the intent of the certification and the project was not to make any changes to existing water rights. And so the clarification that's being input into mitigation measure 3 is to clarify that we're not changing the water rights decree in any way, that PG&E shall be required to comply with that decree as written.
And that was my understanding too, that it's really that's the decree is not the State Water Board's really business in this matter. And we weren't to touch that in those conditions, in any conditions we make on this certification of this project.
Right, mitigation measure 3 is about, as Aaron mentioned before, preventing stagnation in the forebay, essentially, when the temperature reduction device has been constructed and is in operation, because that temperature reduction device is a pipe that would bypass essentially the forebay. And so stagnation is a potential problem. Mitigation measure 3 is intended to address that. And so the discussion of the decree in there has only ever been to reference the fact that there are other obligations out there, and to simply note that that's one possible way that the stagnation will be addressed. But of course, the mitigation measure doesn't rely upon that. It just mentions it. And so the changes have been at the request of PG&E and the request of the other commenters to make it clear that the project has never been proposing any change to the decree or obligations under the decree, and the board is not taking any position as to what PG&E's obligations are under that. It is to address the stagnation issue in the forebay. So that's what mitigation measure 3 is intended to do, has always been intended to do, and in fact does.
Yeah, that's really the narrow purpose of that language. And I would note the comment that the Helltown ravine flows appear to, based on the maps you provided me, be influenced by that flow. But that, again, we're not dictating how that flow ends up there. But there are conditions in the certification that obviously there's a relationship to the canal.
Right, and so I think that is an important note. We do have requirements, minimum in-stream flows throughout the project area. How PG&E provides those flows, will depend on the operations. But for everybody to know, this certification is not in effect at this point in time. This certification becomes effective once it's incorporated into the FERC license. So even if the board adopts the certification today, it will be submitted to FERC as a revised certification for inclusion in their license. Prior to FERC issuing that license, they still need a biological opinion from the National Marine Fisheries Service. So that's an outstanding item, and we don't foresee that FERC will issue that license until they have that biological opinion.
Oh, good. And then finally, I just want to echo that sentiment that Mr. Steindorf issued. Is I don't want to see from PG&E a record of constantly questioning our deputy director and executive director's 401 just as a matter of practice. I want to see substantive areas of discussion between stakeholders that come before us if that decision is made by PG&E. I find that we have a system that's in place that works, and appealing to the board should not be a matter of course, but a matter of exception. Thank you.
So just in follow-up to Mr. Moore's question and the response, I understand this is going to take a little while to be implemented, but if you could contrast those minimum flows, I think it is an opportunity, maybe for folks to better understand what the potential is here. So contrast those minimum flows to what they've experienced, what the community experienced this last year on, shutting the canal off for a period of months. So if this were in effect, how would it be different from a practical matter?
So to the Helltown ravine minimum in-stream flows, those are set at no diversion shall occur until those minimum in-stream flows are met. And that is largely meant for the water in Helltown Ravine tributary. So Upper Centerville Canal utilizes Helltown Ravine as a conveyance structure, but the minimum in-stream flow set on Helltown Ravine is meant for the water that's natural to that tributary. Does that help?
So to clarify, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, the flow requirements at Helltown Ravine are to be provided first and foremost, and any water in excess of that can be diverted, is the way the certification is written. Now, the mitigation measure 3 did state that a portion of the water that exits, if it exits down Upper Centerville Canal, that at least 2 CFS could be used to satisfy the decree requirements. It doesn't have to be used to satisfy those decree requirements, but that was what the certification stated in the original certification, was that we recognize that PG&E has an obligation in certain instances to provide 1.175 CFS to water users along Upper Centerville Canal. Once the temperature reduction device is in place, they'll be needing to make sure there's at least 2 CFS moving in the DeSabla forebay to prevent stagnation and make sure water quality parameters are acceptable. Now, a portion of that could go down Upper Centerville Canal and provide water to the water users. But all we're doing in the certification is requiring compliance, or noting that they have a decree and that they are required to comply with that decree. We are not speaking to what the terms of that decree are.
Now, is that, I don't want to get into the weeds, and that's because the decree is a court-ordered decree rather than a water rights decision of this board, and we get involved in those when the court asks us to, generally?
That's one reason. The other reason is that it's not part of the project. So we didn't...
It's off to the side of the project. So it's not actually affected by this certification?
Well, I think there's going to be different opinions about that, but the project, the CEQA project that the board is considering is not involving any modifications to the decree or the requirements that PG&E must comply with. And so I don't mean not part of this project, because the Upper Centerville Canal is...
I didn't bring my map.
The Upper Centerville Canal, depending on one definition of what the project is part of PG&E's project. The decree requirement is not part of the project that was ever in front of the board for consideration. And so we're not taking any position on what PG&E is obligated to do for the reason that it was not presented to us. And the secondary reason, like you said, that usually the board doesn't adjudicate or get involved in water rights disputes that did not originate with the board. So pre-14 appropriative or riparian water rights issues, unless a court refers it to the board. The board might, in the first instance, decide disputes amongst water right holders if the board had issued those rights, like post-1914 water right appropriative permits or licenses. But generally, the board is not the first place that people go. And you've heard a number of times that the board can't decide. I mean, that's what people have contended. The board can't decide disputes amongst pre-1914 water right holders. I'm not answering that question.
But we don't agree with that.
I agree. So I'm not disputing that we have our opinion about what the board does and does not have authority over, but you've heard different opinions about that. And generally, the board is not the venue of first instance for disputes amongst pre-14 appropriative or riparian water right holders. And there's a court decree. Usually, if somebody wants to amend a decree, they go to that court, or have a dispute about the decree, they go to that court where the decree was issued, and we are not that court.
So if I'm hearing all of this right, I know we talked about this a bit before, but just listening to the folks, there was language in here that was asked for, or there were requests from PG&E to change some of the language. Then we had objections from the community that we were actually messing in the decree one way or the other, and what you've tried to do in the change petitions, make sure we're not inadvertently messing with the decree. And then, and again, I'm sorry I didn't bring my map down, the mitigation that's for the DeSabla forebay may well have the impact of helping in that issue, because the water flowing down will help deliver that water. Where the dispute that the community members have with PG&E, I know we don't get to mess around in everything that we might want to, just as people's neighbors or people, and he's already given gratuitous advice. I would give advice to PG&E on how to be a good neighbor too, but what once the certification goes in, see if I understand, you were saying it's not in effect until it's in, it should have the impact of being helpful to folks. I mean, where do interruptions come in?
So there's no promise of benefit.
Just
there's
Felicia wants to know.
Yeah. So there's the potential for benefit associated with the mitigation measure. The mitigation measure allows a mechanism through which PG&E could provide water to Upper Centerville Canal to promote circulation in the forebay and prevent stagnation. So there is that potential there. When the temperature reduction device plan comes to the State Water Board for approval, PG&E will have to talk about that mitigation measure and how they plan to implement that mitigation measure and propose, we'll be able to review it at that point in time and see what the implications are.
So they will come back at the implementation phase and you will look at it?
Yes. So once the license is issued, within 2 years of the license being issued, PG&E needs to submit a plan to the State Water Board for Deputy Director approval that will outline what they're proposing for the DeSabla forebay temperature reduction device, and one element of that is the mitigation associated with the temperature device, which is mitigation measure 3. And then within 2 years of that, which is actually 4 years of license issuance, PG&E needs to construct and begin operation of the DeSabla forebay temperature reduction device and implementation of the associated mitigation measure.
So this is not the end of the story, right? It continues. All right, other thoughts? I appreciate your attempting to be helpful and all.
I move approval of the proposed order.
With the change sheet.
Absolutely with the change sheet.
With the change sheet underscored.
I'll second the motion.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Open. It carries, and I'll take my unofficial concerns down unofficial paths. All right. Thank you all. Thank you for taking the time to come and educate us about that. And thank you to those of you who've been working on it for a zillion years. And thank you for your thanks of the staff who've been working on it for a zillion years. Always appreciated. Are we okay without taking a break and just continuing on? Is that all right? All right. No, I think that self-help is a good idea. It can. All right, because I know Mr. Oglesby has places to be, things to do, people to see. Item number 7. That's right, self-service.
And so the presentation. Good morning, board members.
Morning.
Excuse me, just let me get my notes organized. It's a very serious, important issue to follow. I appreciate your work here at the at the Water Board. My name is Rob Oglesby. I'm the Executive Director of the California Energy Commission. I'm here today to present a report of an advisory committee that was created in order to monitor progress in the ramifications of the implementation of the once-through cooling policy that was adopted by the board and applies to the state's power plants. During the course of the year, and this is
we're quite a ways into the process of implementing the policy, and during the course of the year, the staffs of our two agencies, plus others, including the energy agencies and others, meet and monitor progress and receive information and prepare a report that then goes to the SWRCB committee. And my job today is to provide a summary of the report. I'll provide a couple of updates because since the time the report was done, there have been just a few changes in the status of a few things. So first, a very quick snapshot on the universe of plants that were covered by your ruling. As about 19 plants that go up and down the coast of California were judged to have an unacceptable impact on ocean life because they utilize once-through cooling. The phase-out requires them to shift. Offered a couple of options, one to get out of it entirely, the other was to meet a performance standard. Where we are now, I know this is small, I'm going to go into these in a little more detail, but where we are now is quite a ways down the road. And in this chart, you have the plants depicted where OTC policy has been achieved, where the ones that are on track, and then the yellow dots over the plants indicate ones that bear watching as they approach the compliance dates, and I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. The overview, however, is that 7 plants have crossed the finish line. Congratulations. 7 plants are on track to achieve compliance, and the 4 plants bear watching, and you may need to come back for one or more of them and adjust the compliance, but the jury is still out. Since the reporting by the SWRCB committee, an announcement's come out that also bears on this subject, but not on this report, and that is the Diablo nuclear power facility owned by PG&E has been announced that it will not continue past the expiration of its current licensure. And that's a significant once-through cooling source. So charting progress in an aggregate scale, now understanding their local impacts for each plant, this is an aggregation of the water use, design flow rates proposals, and progress to date. And a couple of interesting things about this chart is that the red line, which is our actual progress versus projections, has shown that the progress is way ahead of what was expected. Now, you'll notice that the red line also has an uptick for 2015. I spent quite a bit of time trying to get a clear answer on that, and it's not an overall trend. It's not a reversal of the policies. It is a reflection of the way the power plants on the coast were operated in 2015. And that had a lot of influences on it, including how many units were being operated at Diablo compared to the previous year, how much the ocean cooled power plants are being used to make up for during the loss of hydro during the drought, and some other operational factors. But it's not an indication of a setback, and absent a couple other activities in 2014 might have just shown a smoother downward slope there. So. But generally speaking, we are way ahead of the game. So as we look at what remains to be done, there are a number of pending actions that have a bearing on the prospects for the plants to complete their on schedule. And so I'm going to review a few of the state agencies to basically say what's in the air, what balls are in the air in terms of going forward. At the Energy Commission, we've got licensing proceedings underway for Alamitos, Huntington Beach, and Mandalay, which is being renamed as Puente. And I could add another one. There's a competing project for that that's called Mission Rock. We also have suspended licensing proceedings for El Segundo and Redondo Beach. At the CPUC, we have some important pending actions as well. The commission decision for Carlsbad is under review by the Court of Appeal, as are repowering projects at Alamitos and Huntington Beach. The outcome of those decisions can have a significant impact on on how other power plants need to be, or how long power plants need to be operated. The last bullet on that slide relates to the Puente power plant, and at this point in time, however, a power purchase agreement, which was the issue, has been approved for Puente. At CAISO, shared jurisdiction over a transmission project is a significant factor on the schedule affecting some of the pending power plants. The Mesa Loop-In project ties a 500 kilovolt transmission line to load-serving circuits in the western LA basin. It's actually physically a small project, a small power line hookup, major improvements at a substation, however, and it's undergoing review at the CPUC CEQA process. But the availability of that transmission improvement increases the flexibility at which the grid can be operated and provides less pressure on the continued operation of the once-through cooling plants that are still working. CAISO is doing some studies to analyze those kind of interactions. The next thing I'm going to move to are some of the selected plan updates. I've already given you the kind of the high-level overview of where we stand. This is an aerial, all the power plants have aerial views. This is the Pittsburgh aerial view. As you may recall from last year's report, the Pittsburgh plant is impacted largely by 4 transmission improvement projects. The 3 of the 4 are on track to be completed, and the 4th is also being evaluated right now by CAISO. But at this point in time, we don't recommend any changes in the compliance state for this. It looks like we're substantially underway with the transmission line improvements, which affect the significance of this power resource. Moving on to Moss Landing, which I know the board is intimately familiar with and had a settlement with Moss Landing. This is the state's largest capacity power plant. Consists of 2 halves, a relatively modern half and some older units. The intakes in the Elkhorn Slough outflow into the ocean. And thanks to the agreements that have recently been reached, the track true compliance appears to be on track. The comment I would add to that is that Dynegy has, under the settlement, agreed to install variable speed pumps on units 1 and 2 by December 31st of this year. We're watching closely what their application process is. We haven't seen a lot of the paperwork being filed yet to get that done, although there's been communication between Energy Commission siting staff and the applicant. But that's still a pending activity, but otherwise is not one of the ones that's on our concern list. Moving south, El Segundo, thankfully we can pretty much take that off of our list. It's in compliance. That happened over the in this past year, so we're in good shape there. I'll move ahead to Redondo Beach. There's been a lot of attention on Redondo Beach. Currently, our licensing, pending license with the Energy Commission has been suspended. Some of the air credits at the Redondo Beach would be retired from Redondo Beach and applied to the Alamitos proposal to be updated at the Alamitos and Huntington Beach. Excuse me, Huntington Beach. This is one of the few projects that could be impacted if the Mesa Loop is delayed, and CAISO is taking a look at that. So I'd like to turn, oh, I'm sorry, I should have clicked ahead on that. Again, restating. So now let me turn to the projects that are on the watch list and really deserve your attention going forward. These are Huntington Beach, Alamitos. Again, Mandalay is renamed as Puente, and Carlsbad, or Encina, renamed as Carlsbad. First, a look at Huntington Beach. This is a power plant that sits on the beach at Huntington. Currently, it's a repower. We did a license, and so now an amendment is pending on that. I think the site of activity on the Huntington Beach project is between the applicants and the Energy Commission primarily. And the design, after being approved in one design form, the applicants, AES, have changed the design of the plant, submitted a revised amendment application. We're going through that process right now, but we'll have to take a look at that. Right now, we're just saying watch. Ormond Beach is one of 3 projects in the Ventura area. They're interrelated. They're interrelated in their support of the grid now. And how we go forward on any one of them is related to the other ones. Overall, there's less energy generation needed in that region, so we can, if you will, downsize overall capacity and still meet reliability needs. Right now, the rather large plant at Ormond Beach is proposed to be closed by letter sent to the Water Board. And so when they reach their deadline for phasing off of once through cooling, they'll plan to shut down. So that leads us to Mandalay. There's a lot going on related directly to Mandalay and indirectly to Mandalay. Mandalay is up the beach from Ormond. It's an older plant, had been a large plant, excuse me, and it's being proposed to be repowered to be more compatible with renewable resources and also to be downsized. And the CPUC has provided a power purchase agreement to Mandalay. But at the same time, while this is undergoing review by the Energy Commission for that repowering, another plant in the vicinity, Mission Rock, has also applied. And between the two of them, it would be more energy than would be needed in that area. But both of them have controversies associated with the licensing decision. There's opposition to the plants, which is not unusual. But we're going through those licensing proceedings right now. At this point in time, we don't recommend a change in its compliance date.
And am I making it up, or are your headers green light and yellow light? Is that
Green,
and we just don't have any red lights yet? Is that, or does it just
you're dead on. We color-coded the on track is green and watch is yellow, and you were right. We don't have a red yet.
Okay.
And
And
hopefully won't.
is the Mission Rock Energy Center license, that's inland, correct?
It's inland.
Okay.
It has other features associated with it. It does not have a power purchase agreement. And as I said, both plants have local opposition to being constructed. Both plants are going through the energy proceedings right now.
And both gas plants?
They are both gas plants. Let's talk about Alamitos for a minute. Alamitos is in the Los Angeles area near the port. The intake for the facility is up that canal, and it's adjacent from a plant operated by LADWP. And it's a pretty significant piece of infrastructure in that area, significant role, significant capacity. However,
Significant visual. I mean, it's significant.
It's in an area that has long time been used for power generation. It's kind of an industrial area adjacent to the ports and refineries and other industrial uses. Because of the change in our grid and the characteristics of our grid, the design of this and the other plants are all not only taking into account our needs to get off once-through cooling, but also to integrate better to the grid and provide the flexibility and the resources needed to support renewable energy. This is consistent with that. It has a power purchase agreement. The application to the Energy Commission is pending. We're actively working on it. And again, the Mesa Loop is also one of those factors that could influence the schedule there. And now let's talk about Encina, which is next to Carlsbad. This is probably the stickiest issue in the bunch. So the issue with Encina, the licensing of its replacement facility at Carlsbad has been completed by the Energy Commission. There is litigation pending challenging the plant. The decision was thought to be forthcoming sooner. It's still waiting. I don't have a projection on when certainty will be provided. But depending on that, will influence on whether that and the analysis that's being done by CalISO will determine whether we will come back to you and recommend that you revisit the schedule for Encina. Right now, the anticipation is, or Carlsbad, well, Encina is the phase-out, Carlsbad the replacement. Right now, Energy is anticipating a delay, but we'll see. And the CalISO assignment in this is to determine how critical that energy resource would be at the time that it may be extended, which would be during the first quarter of the year in the winter. So that analysis is being done. Litigation is pending. We will get back to you on whether we think a change in course needs to be made. But I wanted to flag this for the board as one of to date, this is the most significant question mark that we've had to present to you. So overall conclusions for the SACWIS report is that we're not recommending any compliance state changes. There's procurement authorization sufficient to maintain reliability. But if some of the plans and anticipated actions don't come to pass on time, we will need to come back before you and apprise you of that for your consideration. As I mentioned, particularly in the Ventura area, we're looking at overall less units, less power, less gas-fired power being necessary in the region. But coming forward, we may have to come to you and ask you or advise you of potential need to modify compliance states. And that concludes my report.
On those possible modifications, do you think that will fall outside of the normal annual cycle of reporting?
I think it's well possible. And I think it's also incumbent upon us to let you know as soon as possible so you can schedule it and deal with the public process that you would have to deal with. But I was hoping to have more information on some of the things that are pending by now.
I just want to thank you for hanging in there and making this process move as smoothly as it is, given all the many players who are engaged, and really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I think this is a great success story. I think it's a great success story for the water board because you've been able to phase out once through cooling, but it's also accelerated the conversion of some of the natural gas fleet to a form that helps implement renewables.
21st century.
Yeah, very well managed process. My compliments to you and the colleagues and the other agencies.
Other agencies, yeah, multi-agency. Many members of the team.
Thank you, and thank you for taking it on and always explaining it so well, including the color coding.
I think Encina could have been orange, though.
Encina could have been orange. Little flames starting to flicker.
So I'd like to just jump in for a minute and ask, can we bring the presentation back up?
Yeah.
Because we don't do this enough, and if we
Want to
go
look back at the graph?
at the graph,
That
and
graph is pretty awesome for
and we
all
need to
those who care
celebrate.
about fish.
It is slide, I don't know.
California's exceptional marine environment.
Back. There you go, the graph.
There.
Yes.
There's another wallet card.
That's exactly right. This is pretty impressive protection and improvement. Both the planned and the actual is even better. And I just want to remind folks that this has been going on for 6 years, and it's got a few more years, but we've already made almost more than 50% reduction in the ocean impacts. And so when this comes, as these things come forward, we should celebrate it every once in a while.
Very good point. My thanks to those of you who were here when you took that bold move. Really very important. Thanks, Rob. And thanks, Jonathan. That very good point. All right, item number 8, board member reports. May I start on the right?
Yeah, this last week, after participating in the water fix hearings a little bit with you all, I went to San Luis Obispo to visit the regional board in the Central Coast region, and they were doing some basin plan work primarily, and they're continuing to track our work on the petition for the irrigated lands orders and stay tuned into that. So that was good to hear about their progress. And they're interested in moving forward integrated water management. They have that in their training review and as a project, so I'm encouraging them to get in touch with their local IRWMs to think about how that process could be coordinated. Central Coast has an interest in that's fairly acute in terms of their groundwater dependence. 86% of the water supply on the Central Coast is groundwater, and it relates to issues like stormwater infiltration and all of those initiatives that we're involved in. So it's a good place to try out integrated water management in the basin plan. And so it was good to visit with them. And then I would just note quickly, yesterday was our monthly chairs meeting attended by 7 of our 9 regions. And this year we've been drilling down onto how the budget's set up and the budget change proposal process and engaging the chairs and the EOs with our staff. And so we were talking about potential legislative concepts because this is this time of year where Rob Eagle manages the process for all staff, but really, pointing out to board members as an opportunity for them to think about what legislative fixes may be out there for pending issues in the regions. Of course, of statewide significance. So I thought it was a very constructive dialogue. We covered a lot of ground and a lot of potential program areas. I won't go into great detail other than to say I just thank the chairs and EOs and Fran and John Russell, John Bishop, Eric Oppenheimer, and Rob Eagle who are participating in these discussions. I think it's a real good team building effort. So we'll continue to work on that, and that will continue through the annual Water Quality Coordinating Committee, which is scheduled for October 24th and 25th. So, and with that, I'll conclude my report.
I just want to do a shout out to the Water Fix hearing team for all the excellent preparation leading to a really smooth start of the Water Fix hearing. So water rights staff as well as OCC Council and even Office of Public Participation, I think, had translator on standby, and our information officers are on standby as well. So everyone pitched in, and really appreciate the excellent support and preparation leading to the hearing.
Yeah. Well, chaired hearing. Thank you very much.
I just have one report, and that is I went to the dedication of this is another one of those, like once through cooling, one of those things that just been hanging fire for so long. It's the Woodland Davis, UC Davis water plant that was built with design, build, operate, came in on time, under budget. They were very proud of that, and it's another example of where we are I think we're the funders of this project, and it comes from of course the ratepayers are the real funders of the project, but the loans came from our revolving loan funds, both the Drinking Water Fund and the Clean Water Fund. So it was an example of taking advantage of that coordinated effort, and there were several opportunities where the Water Board was specifically named as having played a useful role, and one in fact came with our regulatory activities, both on the drinking water side as well as the clean water side. Everyone realized once we were starting down the fine route, having found that there were problems, that they really had to get together and make this happen. And so while they drug it out over a long period of time, they got busy and hired a good person to help oversee it, and the rest is history. So they now have they have the capacity of producing safe drinking water and clean water that go beyond regulations at the current level. Thank you.
That's great.
Okay, the only thing I have is that yesterday I participated in a meeting with the governor's office and others from the Drought Task Force regarding an interest in having some regional drought task force meetings in the valley like we did last year. So these would be very targeted, smaller group meetings where we could in advance be prepared to by looking at whatever issues we should bring up region by region, focus on subsidence, implementation of SGMA, some of these issues, it's at the San Luis Reservoir, ongoing drought impacts. CDFA has a draft impacts report that they're getting ready to roll out. So this would be the third year for that. So it'd be an opportunity to roll that out as well. And included in the meeting yesterday was Eric Ekdahl and Darren Polhemus. And Eric, I asked them to get a hold of you because I think this is an opportunity to give an update also on capture of stormwater and groundwater recharge. So maybe bring in some folks from the water rights team.
That's fantastic.
I don't know where I'm going to find the time to participate in these, but we'll see what we can do. If not, I think, there'll be plenty of staff to do that. And then maybe if Board Member Moore, Spivey Weber might be interested, we're looking at probably September timeframe.
Okay. Yeah, we have a break in water fix in September, so maybe that'll work. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, but the calendar is already kind of full, so.
Because everything else gets crammed into the 3 weeks,
so
right?
we'll see. I'll let you guys know.
All right. I don't have anything to add other than my deep gratitude to the team and to Tam in particular. It's going to be interesting. Yeah. All right. We have a closed session. If you don't mind, I need to get protein. Are people okay if we reconvene at noon and just have lunch together for the closed session and take 20 minutes now to check our emails and grab some food? Okay. So we will reconvene in the usual room? Okay. All right. See you all at noon. Thank you.